Welcome to the Bipolar DM podcast. This is being broadcast on WLFE-DB radio. Thank you for listening. This is a podcast about Dungeons & Dragons, independent writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. If you want to get a hold of me, got a question, comment, topic, suggestion, you can reach me at thebipolardm@gmail.com. Go to my webpage as well, and you can get a hold of me and find me at www.thebipolardm.com. There you'll find previous episodes of this podcast, as well as my blog and resources and links to topics on Dungeons & Dragons, on independent writing, and on mental illness. If you're a fan of us and are on Facebook, we have a fan page. It is called at The Bipolar DM, and that is the handle for it. There I have more regular updates than I do on the webpage, just because it's easier to do this when I'm on the go with my phone, take pictures or post articles or videos, and I could do that fairly quickly there, more so than I can with the software I use for the webpage. And if you are a big fan of the show, a true hardcore fan, I have a private group available. It is free to sign up. All you have to do is agree to obey one rule, and one rule only. Respect each other. You do that, I don't have to put 10 pages of rules up there for anybody coming in, all right? Don't be an asshole. Go ahead and join up, sign up. Write on my board, for crying out loud. Nobody writes on it. Everybody, you see all these articles and these videos and stuff like that, and nobody comments on them. So please, make a comment. Please be respectful, all right? Be respectful to each other, and please be respectful to me. If you're not, your ass is gone, all right? I'll give you one warning and one warning only, and then after that, your ass is gone, all right? So, be respectful. Okay, getting on to the show in progress, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, all right? Now, of course, this is what the show primarily is about, Dungeons & Dragons and mental illness. I talk about mental illness all the time, but in the previous 3 seasons that I've done this show that I got in the can already, I don't know, it's been a while since I've talked about, exactly what is Dungeons & Dragons. Let me give you a little background on my experience in Dungeons & Dragons. I started into Dungeons & Dragons when I was in high school. And even then, the spark for Dungeons & Dragons started long before then in junior high. I was in Japan, and in junior high, somebody left a book lying on a table. And I picked up that book, and it was called Dragons of Autumn Twilight. It was a Dragonlance novel, a fantasy novel. It was the first time I've actually read a long book, like a novel, all the way straight through for pleasure. I've always had to do it for school and shit like that, but, this was the first time I've actually finished a book for myself, and I loved it. And I got the other copies as soon as I could get my hands on them, and there's 3 in this series. And it was what sparked my interest in Dungeons & Dragons. And I actually went on eBay last year and bought a set of those books too, and now here they are sitting on my desk right here. But this sparked my interest in Dungeons & Dragons because as I read the stories, I wanted so much to be a part of it, and I wished. It's like, how can I be in this story? I would just want to be a character in this world. It was so vivid and fleshed out and such an adventure that I went on, that I wanted to be a part of it. Fast forward to high school. My family and I, we returned back to Japan, and now I'm there for my sophomore, junior, senior year. I came in the middle of my sophomore year, and so some of the people I knew from before were still there, but most everybody left, so it was, but at this time, it was also the first time that I went to a school and I didn't feel like the new kid. That was the first time in my life that I ever went to a school and was not the new kid in school. Because when I went back to Japan, and believe it or not, I went to 14 different schools growing up. I've counted 14 schools. And I was always the new kid. Some of you remember your first day of school. You know what? Try reliving that 14 times. You think that was bad? Yeah. That's the life of a military brat. But anyways, I got this book, and then in high school, Stars and Stripes bookstore, that was at the time was the official bookstore for the military, has since been folded. They started carrying Dungeons and Dragons, or actually they started carrying Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, AD&D 2. And it was a very complex system. I mean, it was not easy. We had to have charts and shit like that in order to play this stuff. But, so I got this book, and I got the Player's Handbook, I got the Monster Manual, I got, the 3-wing binder. I got as much as I didn't have anything else to spend my money on in high school. I had a job, but really, I had no interest in buying booze and liquor on the economy because I could, or the fucking latest clothing that came in at the Navy Exchange, that 12 other people have at the same time in my school. No, I saw this and I wanted to be a part of a story. Unfortunately, I did not know a damn person who played it. So you know what I did? I put an ad in the base paper and I got a response. And from there, we started an amazing journey. I've actually DM'd more than I've played. I probably only played a couple times in my life. But when I started DMing and started creating these worlds for my friends, it was an amazing journey. And that is what Dungeons and Dragons is all about. Imagine, if you could, that story or movie or anime or manga or whatever, or even just your imagination. You are part of that story. And you're a character in it that is able to go anywhere you want to go, do anything within the limits of your imagination, say whatever comes to your mind. You can do all these things through Dungeons and Dragons, because at its very core and essence, Dungeons and Dragons is a collective storytelling experience. And when I say experience, it is an experience. It's not just a story, it's an experience. And we introduced dice, various sided dice, whether it's a 4-sided, a 6-sided, a 8-sided, a 10-sided, a 12-sided, a 20-sided, a 100-sided, whatever. We introduced dice so that there is randomness and the chance of failure. And with that, when you roll the dice, the story can go into any direction whatsoever. You have no idea where it will go. When I write a campaign, when I write an adventure, I have no idea how it's going to end, because as much as I like to write the whole thing out, when I do, don't get me wrong, there is a beginning, middle, and end, just like any other story. However, when I play Dungeons and Dragons, though, I leave a bare bones skeleton, because I learned a hard lesson years ago while I was DMing. I was in the Army, and some buddies of mine, and I still have my stuff from high school, some buddies of mine wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. So we get ahead and we start playing Dungeons and Dragons in the barracks, and then they come to this town, newcomers, the party does, and the guard sees them. Friendly guard, he wants to come over and say hi to them. So as soon as the guard approaches, before his mouth opens, one of the guys in the party yells, "Run!" And all of a sudden, they split into 4 different directions. And I had no freaking clue how I was going to manage this when it went off the rails. I had no plan for this. How am I going to run 4 different chase scenes when I have never in my life done a chase scene? And I got 4 of them. Needless to say, that lesson there made me realize that players are capable of just about anything, and some of them have some twisted imaginations. So Dungeons & Dragons in its very essence is a collective storytelling experience with dice that is introduced so that there is randomness. The Dungeon Master writes the story. You as a player character or PC are a part of that story, directing it and developing it. People write whole books about it. Well, that was what Dragons of Autumn Twilight was. When I found out about it and read in the cover that it was based on a game that these people, that a group of friends had played, and that this was actually their campaign as it unfolded, as they played Dungeons and Dragons, they decided to go ahead and turn that campaign into a book. That was wow. I had got to get my hands on this and do it. And so I have been doing this off and on for a good part of my life, and well over 20 years. I have blown a lot of money on Dungeons and Dragons stuff. I do crafts, do minis, I paint minis. So, when we do some Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of this show we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons too, and we're going to talk about stuff like paints and minis and making your own terrain and where to find the best videos for doing this stuff and stuff like that, and how to Dungeon Master better. We're also going to talk about, Dungeons and Dragons and therapy as well, as I learn and develop my knowledge base on this as I'm going through school. Or classes, it's not school. As I'm going through classes, talking about and learning about this, I'm going to turn around and relate it back to you guys. What I have learned and what I've experienced, how to best use the methods of psychology in play therapy and Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about that through this season of WLFE-DB Radio on the Bipolar DM podcast. So, going back to Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, like I said, is collective storytelling. You play a part in it, and the Dungeon Master, he writes the story, you're a character in the story. And so, we go through and we run an adventure. And it could be like The Hobbit, and a lot of Dungeons and Dragons was based on like The Hobbit. So much so that Gary Gygax and TSR got sued by the Tolkien estate for copyright infringement, and they had to make some adjustments. So with the history of Dungeons and Dragons, if by any chance you get the original Dungeons and Dragons paper booklet, and basically it was just a paper booklet printed on a cheap printer and stapled together and folded in half, and they quote unquote borrowed heavily from Tolkien's A Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and they had to make some changes. And so then when Dungeons and Dragons 1E came out, the official 1E, it was radically different and more compliant to copyright laws. Gary Gygax and his friends were the inventors of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Dungeons & Dragons sprung off another game, miniature warfare. And what that is you have armies of miniatures, and you reenact great battles, Waterloo, or, Pickett's Charge, or whatever, however you want to do it, whatever battle you want to reenact. You do that with these minis and use dice to determine the damage that your forces inflict upon the other one. And Gary and his friends, they were quite young at this time when they started doing this, in high school and all that. They got this idea. Why don't we shrink it down now from large unit tactics to small unit tactics and individual tactics? And how will we do that? And what's more, instead of it being like in the Napoleonic Age or the Civil War or whatnot, let's set it in a fantasy world like Tolkien's. And unbelievably, it took off. First, they started playing it, where they, at the public gathering area where everybody, the comic book shop or whatever, that everybody came to play miniature warfare. Him and his buddies were doing this game, and people saw him doing it, and they got interested. And Gary his buddies printed out this cheap workbook that they kind of made themselves. The original rule set for Dungeons & Dragons, the holy grail of collectors of Dungeons & Dragons, is this booklet. And if any of you out there happen to have a good copy of one, let me know. Maybe we can do some trading or something like that. I got shit to trade. We can find a way we can get that, but I would love to have a copy of that just for my own collection. Having shamelessly plugged myself again, let's go back to Dungeons & Dragons. Now, if you want to get into Dungeons & Dragons, the 5th edition actually is probably one of the easiest editions to learn of Dungeons & Dragons. It is more focused on role-playing, character development, storytelling, and less on the combat dice rolls. Now, there is combat, and you can have you can go murder hobo on the town and all that, and do that kind of campaign. Or you can have a campaign that's based on intrigue and mystery. Or you could be solving a murder or some kind of great crime, or trying to clear your name, or you are trying to stop a war from happening. There's limitless possibilities when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons and storytelling. And if you want to get involved with 5th, the rules are pretty easy. And what's even better, Wizards of the Coast, who right now own the rights to Dungeons & Dragons now, have the rules available in PDF format, the basic rules, for free. Yeah, free. You can go to their website and get it even at WOTC.com. WOTC.com. Wizardsofthecoast.com. So you go there. They have it free in PDF format. They say basic rules. It's 187 pages long. So you're going to get everything you need to know about playing, just to play Dungeons & Dragons. Free. So then the only thing you have to buy is just a set of dice. And that's, and you can get off eBay or Amazon or even Dollar Tree, even just carrying some Dungeons & Dragons dice amazingly. However, if you want to go ahead and make the investment, especially if you're our player, if you're really getting into this, you need to make this investment. First of all, Player's Handbook. That is all the rules. If you're a player and just want to play, that's the only book you're going to need. And everything you're ever going to want to know is in there if you want to go ahead and buy the book. Retails for $49.99, $49.95, I believe. I can actually look it up right now. Yeah. Anyways, it's about $50 for the book, all right? All the books are hardbound. There are no paperbacks. There are no cheap copies unless you get them used. But the books, though, are about $50 each. You want the Player's Handbook, and you want the Monsters Manual. You can get by with just those 2 books. Now, if you got a little money and you're froggy, get the Dungeon Master's Guide as a third. Especially if you have no experience whatsoever dungeon mastering. The Dungeon Master's Guide is a fantastic tool. It does not have rules in it. It does have rules in it, but not anything additional. It more like it elaborates and explains the rules is what it does. So it goes over explaining what, planar travel and encumbrance and stuff like that. Is explained and also there are charts, dice random charts. So just say you want to make an adventure, but you don't know how to do it. So you open the pages to this chart and you roll the dice. Let's just say you roll a 10-sided dice. You roll a 10-sided dice, the numbers could land anywhere from 1 to 10. Well, there's a corresponding chart labeled 1 to 10, and on each number is a different plane of existence or terrain, whether it is the astral plane or the demonic plane, or you're playing in a forest or tundra, or playing in the desert, or the city. It's all random. And then you write that down. And then you flip to another chart. Well, what can the adventure be about? If it's playing in a city, what's it about? roll another dice, and there you go. All random. But, or it give you ideas, and you don't have to do random. You do you. However, that is what the Dungeon Master Guide about. You don't have to do it in order to play, all right? But if you are going to play, these two books you do have to have, which is the Player's Handbook and the Monster's Manual. Both of them for $50 each, all right? So that's a $100 investment, plus dice, which can go way up. And believe me, I got some expensive set of dice. I actually play with a set of metal dice, which is pretty awesome. I love them. The only drawback is that my players can hear me rolling when I'm trying to do a secret roll. And I've done a particular podcast episode talking about that previously, before I was on this network. And you can find that at my webpage at thebipolardm.com, there with my other podcasts. So you got the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide. Other books are available to expand the rule base, such as Volo's Guide to Monsters, Eberron, Rising of the Last War, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. There is Mordekainen's Tomb of Foes. So there's a lot of books that you can invest in to expand the rule sets, which what that means is more characters, more character possibilities, more adventures, and more worlds to explore. That's what these additional books are. So you got the basics, and then you got the expanded universe, such as Waterdeep, a great city that is from the very beginning of Dungeons and Dragons history is Waterdeep. And so you got over 30 years of history and stories made up about Waterdeep, books about it. And you got that. You got the Tomb of Annihilation, which takes place on another part of Farion, the fantasy world of Dungeons and Dragons. So you can get all of that and invest in that. And another thing you can invest in is D&D Beyond. Now, this is the online service that is the official Dungeons and Dragons site. And D&D Beyond is free to sign up for just the basics. And you can create up to 5 characters with that. And that's about all you can do, You do have to purchase books if you want to expand your rules. So you will have to buy the Player's Handbook and the Monster's Manual and some other books at full retail price. Yeah, virtual books at full retail price. Thank you very much, Wizards of the Coast. TSR never would have done this. But if you're playing a lot, though, especially through this pandemic, playing online, and I'm going to do a show about playing online, it is worth it, all right? Now, you get into D&D Beyond and creating the characters. If you actually instead invest in D&D Beyond and not the physical books, like buying the membership, which is really cheap. The basic membership starts at $2.99 a month, and I believe the Dungeon Master's level of membership is at $4.99 a month. And so that's $5 a month to be able to run D&D, create characters and stuff like that. And then if you go ahead and make the investment of the books on there, that's great too. Now, I'm a tactile person. That's because that's how I grew up. So I like having books. I like the feel of books. I like the sound the pages make when they, when you're flipping through them and stuff like that. I like the smell of books. Buying virtual, which I have done just so I can, as a Dungeon Master, be able to expand my universe on D&D Beyond, has been expensive. But if you play a lot, it is a worthy expense, and you don't have to buy it all at once. You can buy a little at a time. So, 50 here, 50 there, adding up. You can do that. So, you invest in all this. You can play online, and Dungeons & Dragons has become so much easier to play. Like I said before, it's more user-friendly because it's more character-centered, and developed. And the rules are pretty simple to get a hold of. They're pretty simple to follow. They're pretty simple to learn. I learn by doing. And a lot of my clients that I'm working with, a lot of my players, I would say, they also learn very well, a lot better than just reading the rules, which I do provide a copy of. But they learn a lot by doing. And so with the campaign I'm starting with the League of Extraordinary Adventurers, which is my campaign that I have for kids and young adults on the autism spectrum. We're going to do a dry run tomorrow and play through and just kind of see how that goes, and get the bugs ironed out and stuff like that. So we're going to practice, try and get this going before we actually get the actual game starting, which actually is next week. So this has been about 6 months coming. It's taken about 6 months for it to come to this point where we actually are rolling dice. And I got to make sure we do it quickly before we start losing interest from players. We got three on my end, 3 on the other, so that's 6 players. I might be losing one if I'm not careful. I'm going to get in contact with her real quick and get that taken care of. But, we got that coming up next week. I had been asked about broadcasting it, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. For one thing, we're dealing with people's medical issues. Although I am not bound by HIPAA laws, I am a combat medic, and I honor the HIPAA laws and my players' privacy. So, will I consider possibly doing a live stream of Dungeons and Dragons like Critical Role or something like that? Possibly. That might be in the future. I got some adult players who might be interested in doing something like that. So we'll keep that on the back burner, though, because right now I got to focus on this right here, and also on 10 other things I got to focus on. But anyways, so we got this going. So with Dungeons and Dragons, there is some, you can get by pretty good without, like, a lot better than when I was a kid. All right. When I was a kid, I walked uphill uphill to school both ways in the snow, barefooted, that kind of shit. And so did Ted, but, you don't have to go crazy on it like I do. But it helps if you do have some materials and have some experience and do some playing too. And it's real easy to get into. YouTube has some awesome videos about it. If anything else, check out a show called Critical Role. That's Critical Role on YouTube. This is a bunch of, as they describe themselves, nerdy-ass voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons. So these guys, you will not believe who's on here. These are guys who do the voices from Overwatch, from Halo, from any video game that you played or anime movie. These guys are the voices behind them. And you would be surprised to find out that maybe your favorite character from this video game is actually playing Dungeons and Dragons. This is a weekly 4-hour show of them playing Dungeons and Dragons, and thousands of people watch it. They are in their second campaign now. This show has been going on for well over 3 years, and it's getting bigger and bigger. The fan base, when they go out to cons, it is unbelievable, the fan base that they have. And we're getting towards time on the broadcast, and I hope I explained Dungeons and Dragons well enough. Now, if you had questions about it, be sure to email me at my email address, thebipolardm@gmail.com. You can get a hold of me through my webpage, www.thebipolardm.com, or my Facebook page at thebipolardm. So you can contact me any one of those ways if you have questions, comments, or snide remarks, or any of that stuff. All right. Be sure, if you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons, look into it. Start out with the free stuff, see if you like it, and if you get a taste of the drug, we got more. All right, and it's going to cost you, but it's fun and it's worth it. All right. Thank you again for listening to WLFE-DB Radio. That is WLFE-DB Radio, The Wolf. I assume I'm just making that up on the fly. I haven't checked yet, so don't quote me on that yet. But it would be a pretty damn cool name for a radio station, as The Wolf. So, and if that's true, you're going to hear me say that all the time just because it sounds really cool. Alrighty, that's the end of our show. Thank you again for listening. This is WLFE-DB Radio. You're listening to the Bipolar DM Podcast. And remember, everybody, take your meds.